Hello, animation fans, and welcome to another iAnimate podcast. I'm your host, Larry Vasquez, and you're listening to episode 67. In this episode, we have Ravi Kamble Govind joining us. Ravi is not only one of our alumni in our feature program, but he was one of our first classes here back in 2010. So it was really, really neat to be able to catch up with him, talk with a feature alumni who's doing some amazing things. Ravi has been kind of traveling the world, as you'll hear in this podcast a little bit. He was at DreamWorks India. He was at DreamWorks China. He's been in London, Spain, and now currently at DreamWorks down in Glendale. He's been a character developer on the Pokémon movie. He's been a character lead and was nominated for an Annie on his work for Penguins of Madagascar with Dave, the octopus, and is now a supervising animator on their Abominable movie coming out. So he's just done some really, really remarkable stuff, and it was just really neat to, like I said, catch up with one of our feature alumni who is just doing amazing stuff. So listen to this podcast. I think you'll really enjoy it. Ravi, thank you so much for joining us in this podcast. I always enjoy doing these, and we've had a great amount of guests and stuff, but it's always neat to be able to get someone like you who's been not only one of our alumni, but you were one of the first class that we started out with. So it's just a really cool opportunity here to get you in this. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you, Larry. I mean, like I was telling you earlier, right? Like it's an honor for me. Like I've always been the kid who, would share all these like podcasts and interviews with people like, hey, look at this cool guy in this interview. It's so cool. Let's watch it. Let's learn from what he says and everything. And it's weird. Now I'm on the other side being interviewed and everyone in the internet is going to see it. So it's great. Very honored. Thank you so much.
Well, you have definitely earned it. It's just been neat keeping up to date with you. Because as you know, we were classmates at one point, because I started out as well, my brother. And so we've always kept up with you. You've done some work with us when you were in an independent.
Lagoon Black, right? Yeah.
That's right. There you go. Which is some amazing work. So it's just been neat to get to talk with you about that and just hear about your journey. So let's jump into the very beginning then. How did you, before we jumped on here, you mentioned you were from Spain.
Yeah.
And it always cracks me up. There is just a pool from Spain there that produces CG artists, and so it's just always neat to hear that. So how did you get into animation? What did you, were you drawing when you grew up? What brought you to this path?
Yeah, it's a long story, but to be honest, it's not that romantic or mystery or something like it's very basic. I grew up watching a lot of cartoons. I just love them. I got attracted to it since my childhood. And I'm from Spain in a place called Gran Canaria. It's part of it's an island, part of a group of 7 islands called the Canary Islands. So it's very small. Basically back in those days in Europe in general, we used to get exposed a lot to animation, but it was mostly like Japanese cartoons, like TV shows from Japan, because licenses were cheaper to get than American cartoons. So actually, I got exposed to a lot of like, Pokemon and Dragon Ball and all this kind of stuff.
Right.
Yeah, Dragon Ball Z and, Saint Seiya and all that stuff. And I discovered like Western animation much later.
Okay.
But I was always obsessed with like the Japanese characters and stuff, and I remember like taking cutouts of magazines and just trying to copy them and things like that. And then I was always at school the kid who would just draw like little caricatures of the teachers in my books and things like that, So I was, from early on, I really wanted to learn to draw and everything. Then halfway through, when I was started to just get more into my high school years and everything, I think we started to get a computer at home and internet and all that. And I kind of deviated from the importance of art, and I started to get attracted to learning about computers. And somehow my focus went onto learning computer-y stuff and video games and all that. So I think I missed out on like art education and all those things. I kind of early on just thought, okay, maybe if I do things like web design and Photoshop and all that stuff, that's the way to go.
Gotcha.
It's only later on that I started to understand more that actually it's about art and the foundations, and and these are all just tools to get you where you want to be. So I was in Spain. I went through my high school years and everything till I was 18. And then there was that question of, what I'm going to do in my life and all that for a career. And I already knew in any capacity, I really wanted to be in this business of animation and making cartoons, and but I just didn't know what exactly. Was it animating? Was it drawing? Was it giving people coffee? I don't know. I have no clue. And one of the things that happened in my last year in high school was my English teacher. She helped me out a lot, like giving me some pamphlets and brochures for universities in the UK that offered, education and animation programs and stuff. And it was a good segue for me also to learn English, because I was obsessed with, I really wanted to see the world and travel, and my English was pretty poor back then. And I was like, oh man, that's a good thing to, just combine both the objectives and, try something there. Yeah. I mean, it was it was not just a simple diploma that you would get. It was actually a university degree. So maybe, career prospects, it would have some usage and stuff. So I was like, okay, let's try to go for that. And my parents, I have to thank them, without their support and their constant backup on everything I've done till today, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. So they've always been behind anything. They've been shocked a lot of times, how obsessed I've been since my childhood and cartoons and things like that. So till today, they tell me the same thing. It's so strange how you got so interested in this stuff, And
that's what you're doing now.
Yeah, and that's what I'm doing for a living. And my dad would always be skeptical about how financially viable this whole thing would be until I started to, work and get some earning. And then he was like, okay, this is actually, it's
viable.
It's viable, yeah. So, but yeah, they really encouraged me, and they made all the necessary arrangements to make sure I get my higher studies in the UK and everything. So that's where I went next. I spent 6 years in England.
Okay.
I was 3 years studying this animation degree, which, I mean, it's called Computer Animation and Special Effects. It was from the University of Bradford. It's in the north of England. But it was very broad. It was a course that would teach us all sorts of stuff, media studies and videography and web design and programming and all that stuff. And there was only one subject on animation, just the one. So a lot of the learning was just I would just go in the nights and the libraries and the university, just suck up on books, and then video tutorials from back in the day. I think I discovered Keith Lango at that time, which I believe he's a teacher now.
He's going to be a teacher. Yeah. I'm getting a podcast scheduled with him pretty soon, but yeah, he's one of our new instructors here. That's so cool. I'll have to tell him.
Yeah, it's incredible. I think, a huge thank to him, because it was the revelation for me of, my love for animation, and just his tutorials and everything. We would be a bunch of friends just watching it together and sucking the stuff together. It was just a lot of homework, and trying to figure all this stuff out. And the importance of drawing. I was like, why didn't I draw more when I was in my high school and stuff? And I started to force myself to, when I would finish my university classes, I wanted to go to extra life drawing classes in the nights and all that. So I would go out and do live drawing. I was reading a lot about people sketching, live sketching, that would go sit on cafes and observe people. So I was trying to mimic all that stuff by my own self. I didn't know what I was doing, but I would just try,
You're trying, yeah.
And and just going through all that, I think I passed my 3 years of university. And during the last year, I was very lucky. There there were a group of guys who were in the university campus. They were setting up their own little company, and they needed like some animation work done, and somehow I connected with them. And that's even before graduating, I was already like starting to do some little freelancing here and there. So that then got my like I managed to make like a little reel and a short film as well. That was like, again, short film. I didn't really know back then what I was doing, but it caught people's attention. I think the university was really, supportive on that, and they sent my stuff to some studios in the UK, like around the north of England, in that area, just like small studios that were looking for juniors.
Uh-huh.
And it just happened to click. I ended up working in a studio in Manchester called Red Vision.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, they were doing a lot of like TV series at that time. It's like 60 seconds of animation a week or something.
Jeez.
It was insane. But it teaches you stuff, like it teaches you to be efficient and streamline your thought process and make sure you get the stuff done. It was a good experience in that way.
Now,
it's
that was not Red Star?
Red Star came later. Yeah,
later.
There's a lot of,
I'm getting the two mixed up. Okay.
There's a lot of red companies for some reason. I don't know why. But yeah, so Red Vision, I was doing TV shows. And then my contract finished with them. And it just happened that Red Star reached out to me. And Red Star is at that time was a small company in Sheffield. And it was run by two of my university teachers. So I already knew them. And they were very kind. Like they already were tracking my progress and my work, and they already knew me. So they offered me a chance to work with them at the time. And I ended up being there for 2.5 years, maybe, something along those lines. And I learned a lot there because it was a small place and I got to wear many hats, so I would do a little bit of, I was mostly doing animation, but I would do a little bit of rigging and a little bit of modeling, very small capacity. And it was like back in the day, we were using I think it was Sofimage, XSI, and Lightwave, and all the Modo, and all these softwares that I haven't touched in years. But it was really fun. It really, the dynamic was so great. Your peers become your friends. I have some of my best friends from those days.
Very cool.
And we still keep in touch. And I did a lot of stuff there. It was really cool. We would do mostly the bulk of work that Red Star used to do was animation for theme park rides and simulation rides and 4D. So we used to do a lot of short films actually, which was pretty cool. It was very unique. Yeah, it was very unique.
Getting to do a full kind of storytelling in that.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, it was obviously tailored to a certain market, and it was a lot about stereoscopic 3D, and so the way the storytelling aspect and all that, the format is very specific to that.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I learned a lot, and I was exposed to even the director would be with us sitting there editing the film, and we would be there, with him. So we were always exposed to the whole process.
Yeah.
You have a problem with the rig, you just go to the rigger and tell him, it's not in a big corporation, it's different, right? So all this stuff was going super well. The only thing was that I think I had an itch as an animator where I really wanted to grow beyond just making characters move. I wanted to know more about what makes those characters move, the thought process behind them, acting, and all the deep stuff that at the time I only would see in feature animation. And that's when I was way more into the Western stuff like Disney and Pixar, and Pixar for me was a huge revelation in terms of what you could do with the medium.
Gotcha.
Really, it's using it as a language to tell what you want to tell. It's not like animation is constrained to just being for kids and being a specific thing. It's actually just a language, a tool.
Yeah.
But the themes they cover in their stories, the way they tell the stories, it's so deep. Even till today, I'm a really big fan. So all that stuff was happening. I was like, oh man, I really want to grow more into a feature quality animation, you know. And funnily enough, that's when I discovered iAnimate.
Okay.
I think it was back in 2010, maybe.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's why I remembered Red Star, because I remember it was about that time when you started at iAnimate.
Yeah. And
now, how'd you hear about iAnimate?
So what was funny was, again, this very tied to my learning of CG. I never got CG right. Like, I was always struggling with how 3D stuff works and the technicality of it all. And I think there was a time when Jason Ryan was doing the JRE demos and everything.
JRA, Jason Ryan Animation.
JRA demos. And I used to love those. Like, he made it feel so easy. Like, oh, you just draw and then you basically transfer what you're drawing in 3D. And, that's awesome.
Does that make sense to you, huh?
And a lot of that, it's like it clicked. Like, okay, I can't draw. And then I would tap into my old days of when I used to draw and everything. I tried to use that and
gotcha.
Make sense of it all. And then through following him, then I started to know about iAnimate. And I think I was really considering Animation Mentor because that was the only school available
at the time. Yeah.
It felt at that time I wasn't, like, my budget wasn't allowing it. I was not rich. I'm not rich now, but I've never been rich, but I was not that rich. And then iAnimate came and I was like, oh, this is so cool. Like, it felt really, accessible. And you guys, like Jason Ryan I was a big fan of his stuff. So it's like, oh, let me give it a try. But I have a job. How am I going to do this? Oh, and it's in US, the time difference. Oh God. And like, you know what? I'll just do it. It's okay. And I did it. I enrolled for the course. I mean, it was
the first,
well, right?
first
batch. Yeah.
And I got to tell you, and I've mentioned this on a couple podcasts before. It's kind of sprinkled throughout, but basically, when I jumped on, it was again first class, and all of a sudden, people start kind of posting some of their stuff, and you're like, oh my gosh, I've got to really step up my game right now. Yours was one of them for sure. I remember distinctly the mask is slipping one.
Yeah.
Where all of a sudden you're looking, you're going, okay. And it propelled and it pushes you. So it's always great to see guys like you that are willing to jump in and really push themselves because it elevated everybody else.
That's so cool to know.
I mean,
I was the same with some of the stuff that people were doing. I mean, there were some really good students.
Yeah.
I remember, Roscoe was there.
Roscoe was the other one.
It was very inspiring. And, there were people like even Juiced and Jorge Garcia, which funnily enough, I'm working with now in DreamWorks.
Oh, yes. That's right.
We were together. And, there's so many people who are doing great stuff. And,
yeah.
And that's the thing. That shot in particular, the one you just mentioned, was like I wanted to put all that desire that I was gathering through the years of I want to do like subtle feature acting, and I've been only animating like these cartoony characters in commercials and stuff. I was gathering all that desire and I just spat it all in this little test, and I was lucky. I mean, I have to give a huge thanks to Ben Rush, my mentor at that time, and he was super encouraging, very kind to me, very patient. I would show him like tons of video reference and all sorts of stuff, and he was very enthusiastic to see that, and
very cool.
He encouraged me a lot. I mean, every showing I had of the exercise, he kept pointing out things, and it just excited me every night. I would be working till I would finish my job, and then I would be working till 4 o'clock in the morning. That's when the lecture would start. The live video sessions would start, and then I had to go to work next day, so I would just sleep a couple of hours. it went through like that for a while. But I'm sure, I mean, I say this, but I'm sure there's a lot of people who have gone through this journey, especially if you're in Europe and things like that. So it's not like unique or anything. I think you just have to do it.
But that's the neat part, though, when it's people like you who are willing to put in the effort and energy. Like I said, it pays off. So it's neat to hear that, and I'm hoping encouraging as well for those that are listening, because you aren't alone if you're the one who's putting in some extra time and dedication for this craft. So I'm sure that's very encouraging to hear that you two were doing that, and now look where you're at. So
I still do it to a certain extent. I'm always on the edge of my seat. I think. I keep telling this to people that animation is so time consuming. You need patience, and you need to be humble about it too. Like it's very easy to think that you figure it all out, and then there's always something new. It's always something, and that's what I love about it. Every single shot, every single character you touch is going to be different. Even if it's like, it's a character, I don't know, like it's running and then he jumps off a cliff or something. And maybe you've animated that before, but it was a totally different context. It was a different character. It was a different place where he was doing. I don't know. There's so many components, and you just have to keep working. And it's part of the love I have for it. It just keeps you, on your toes. So
yep. As I tell people, animation's one of those things that it's always fun and refreshing because it's never the same.
Yeah.
But I said, because it's never the same, you never feel like your feet are secure. So it's always that,
Yeah. And you have to be willing to embrace that uncertainty in a way, make it part of you. Like I always say, I'm okay saying that I embrace animation as part of my life. It's not just a daytime job and I just forget about it. No, I'm constantly thinking, but it's okay. I mean, as long as people are, obviously there are people who would say, but I have my personal life and I have to balance it out. I understand. It of course it happens to everybody, right? But I think as long as people understand your nature and they are supportive, I think it can work out. You can be passionate about it. It's okay.
Yeah.
And I think that's the main key for me. To be passionate about is what keeps you going.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So
now from iAnimate, you graduate. So we started in 2010.
Mm-hmm.
You were our first class as well to graduate, which would have put it 2011. From there, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. 2000. Okay. In fact, I think there was a time. 2011, the end of 2011, which is when I came to LA the first time for the graduation. Yeah, the DreamWorks.
Yes, that was awesome. That was very, very cool.
That was really
beautiful, beautiful campus.
Yeah.
And here's what's so funny. Now you're there as a supervising animator. That is just amazing.
It's I don't know. I don't even know how it happened. The blink of an eye. But
I know it.
But yeah, I mean, it was crazy back then. Again, like so what happened was, at the time I was doing the first assignment, right? The one you mentioned earlier. And that was the first workshop because I started in workshop 3. Back then, I think you guys had 7 workshops maybe, or 6.
6, and now that we have 7. So that would have basically been 4 now, kind of up close acting, right?
Exactly, yeah. So I was in the 3rd workshop, So when I completed that, I had this huge dilemma of, so Ben Rush has been so encouraging about, the work I've been doing and everything, but I'm still doing like commercials and 4D animation and everything. And I was feeling really bad. Like the company I was in was very supportive of me, and they were very, kind to me, and it was a very good place to be. Till today, I really love those guys. But some part of me was like, I need to grow. I need to make that decision. And there was one of my friends there who I still keep in touch with, Francesco. He was like, man, just do it. Just just go for it. Go for, Hollywood and your dream and all that stuff. And I don't know. And because I've always tried to be professional about any commitment I do.
That's great.
I don't like to leave things like in between and just throw the towel and stuff. But so I had this dilemma, but finally I couldn't take it. I was like, okay, I'll just do it. I want to grow as a feature animator. And I finished up some projects that we were doing there. And then I decided to make the leap. And I went back to Spain. And one of my classmates at that, Kwame, I don't know if you remember him.
Yes.
Kwame, who is now at Sony. And he worked on Spider-Verse and everything. He's really good, really very good guy. Cool. And he was super nice. He at that time he was working on a studio called Candor Graphics in the south of Spain, and they were doing a feature. And he was like, we're possibly looking for people. Try. And I was like, yes, feature animation, yes, I want to try. And so things started to happen. I approached them, and luckily they accepted me. And that was timing. My first, good timing. So that was my very first gig in feature animation. What
project was that one?
So it was a movie called Juggling and the Knights of Valour.
Yeah, I remember that one. Okay.
So it was the movie unfortunately I don't think it did very well commercially. It was by European standards, it was a big achievement, but obviously, there were things that it was not up to the standard of like American feature animation, but still there were a lot of really good animators. Like some of them now are like Hokas and directors and things like that. And it was a really good pool of talent there, and I learned so much. I learned like crazy. And I met a lot of my future peers that I will be working with in India, which was my next gig.
Okay.
So what happened was, I was finishing on that movie, and then a couple of guys there, they already were starting to have offers to go to India for Penguins of Madagascar.
Okay.
And they were saying, you have Indian roots, maybe, you could use that as part of your integration in the team and all that. And no, I would have traveled to India because of family. I was familiar with India, but it was still a bit distant for me as a culture. But I was like, okay, let's do it. Maybe it would teach me about myself too, be in that country, and I would just grow. And it's DreamWorks. It's a big studio with a huge name. I would learn so much, and I was in that mode of being a sponge and just trying to absorb whatever I could.
Right.
So I was like, yeah, sure, I'll do it. And so I took the leap, and I went to India. This was in 2013.
Okay.
2013. And I met who I consider my greatest mentor till today, my Hoka at that time, Olivier Stafilas. I don't know if you ever met him.
Yeah. Yeah.
To me, he's the guy who really, he just changed my chip, and I learned animation with him. Up till then, I thought I knew how to animate, but I didn't know anything. Really.
So what was it that he shifted for you?
A lot of things. I cannot pinpoint, but it was just first of all, his eye is amazing. He has a very good eye. The way he would infuse that trust he had on whenever he saw something good, he really encouraged me to do more. So you really want to please him, kind of thing. And that vibe just kept me going. And he always has something. There's never, it's that point, the quest to go to perfection, but obviously perfection doesn't exist, but you're always pushing yourself.
Striving for that.
Yeah, striving for that. And he just had a very amazing eye for spacing. And that's what I learned with him.
Interesting.
Spacing, like just making your characters feel alive, and weight, and all those things that in my physicality was just lacking. And so to the point with that I was able to tackle a character so complex as an octopus, right? That's how much I learned. And there were also great mentors too. It was not just him, it was Jamal.
Yeah, as I said, Jamal Bradley was there at the same time.
Jamal was, again, awesome, very supportive. I have to apologize to him in public in this podcast because he asked me to give him a hand working on his short film, which is amazing in substance. And he's nice enough to have credited me, but I think I honestly didn't deliver. I have to say, I think at that time I was like super swamped, and I was trying to, but I think I didn't deliver, and I have to apologize to him for that.
All right.
I'll always be grateful for whatever he has done. Yeah, he used to share a lot with us, like he was very keen on training the Indian team, and he would always share all the stuff like from when he worked in Disney and Tangled and everything. He would share his tricks, and he would draw a lot. I would love to see him, doing those drawovers and things like that. And
very cool.
He was very supportive in a emotional level too. Like he would, whenever he would see us down, he would try to, bump us up and make sure we are like energetic and
keep him back up on there.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a good leader, man.
Yeah. Jamal was great. And then there were other people too. I mean, Nicolas Chauvelot, again, another great guy. He's one of my other great mentors, and he was a supervisor I worked with in Spain as well before.
Okay.
So we both went kind of together to India from Spain, and all these people. Sami Fassi, he was a great mentor as well. He was the lead on the Octopi, the Minion ones.
Okay.
And he was the first guy to actually tap into these octopus characters and figure out the physicality and all that. And I actually started assisting him in development. That's how I started on Penguins. Because again, he was from Spain. Like he was working with me in Spain too. So we kind of already knew each other and everything. That's how it worked out. And and then from there, things started to grow. I was lucky, my work started to grow, and Olivier started to put more responsibilities on me, and it was just pure chance, I guess. I don't know how to explain it. And then this character, which is still today, I think what I consider my greatest, the most fun I had with a character.
That was it's Bob, right? The octopus's name is what?
Dave.
Dave. Okay.
Dave the octopus.
Now, you got a nomination for an Annie and won it, right?
No, I didn't win. No.
Okay, you didn't win it. You got the nomination.
No way. I mean, there was, that it was crazy. In that year, I think it was Travis Knight for Box Trucks or something.
Oh, gotcha.
I mean, I'm not gonna compete with this guy. What the heck is going on? No way. And then,
but just to be nominated for an Annie, particularly at a relatively young age for you, it's just phenomenal. That is really, really cool.
I mean, till today, I don't understand how it happened. But it's pure luck. I mean, it was great. It was amazing. I would consider it a team effort, not just, I mean, they say individual achievement, and I probably did a lot of the shots, but it's the whole thing counts, like how, and that's part of animation too, like how you're surrounded by really good people and you
great team,
share stuff and you're constantly bashing each other's ideas. And that's one thing that in India, again, it was a highlight in my career till today. There was this energy in the whole team, because we were in the other side of the world, and there was this need to prove to the world that India was able to do good animation. And we shared that, like, really crazy. I mean, we were fearless in tearing apart our shots, and it was okay. That's how I grew. That's why I say it was Bootcamp for me.
Gotcha.
India was like crazy, and I miss that a lot, to be honest. Like, really, that energy is really needed if you wanna, achieve. I mean, you can do like work that is good, but if you wanna do that extra 10%, I think you
surround yourself with people that are on the same page.
That drive and that, So that's how that whole thing in India happened.
What were some of the biggest hurdles you had to overcome in India, both maybe culturally, maybe just the adjustment there, and animation wise?
Culturally, I would say, I mean, I was a bit lucky in the sense that, you know, my heritage is Indian, and
Okay.
since childhood, I've been, my parents, my upbringing has been very, you know, close to Indian culture, and
Gotcha.
I understand the mentality. I would have traveled to India, not that frequent, but maybe like, you know, 5 or 6 times in my lifetime at that time.
Uh-huh.
So I was familiar with the culture. It wasn't that big of a hurdle for me as opposed
Gotcha.
to some foreigners who were there. You know, I had it a bit easier. But I think the struggles were more like work-wise. First of all, I was learning, so I had to catch up. I would see some amazing work, and how I'm gonna keep up with that? So I had to really do a lot of homework, and then I also. I think the hurdles were also the fact that we were working cross-site. So things like, you know, you have dailies with directors and things like that, but it's all, you know, webcam, and it's like sometimes we wouldn't even have the privilege to have a live dailies. They would have seen the shots earlier, and then it's a pre-recorded one, so we cannot discuss, we cannot put across questions and things like that. So it was a bit of a struggle. And then maybe also like in terms of pre-production, because I was involved in development at the time as well.
Uh-huh.
So sometimes, you know, you want to add some requests for the rigs, some improvements and some tweaks. So all that communication was a bit difficult because it was all cross-site. So that was some of the biggest struggles.
Hurdles there,
found.
huh?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But apart from that, I mean, there were struggles, but it was worth it. I mean,
yeah.
we learned so much.
Now, what's happened to that studio there? I know it's no longer part of DreamWorks. Is it just disbanded altogether, or is it another studio? Okay.
No, I think, I mean, it's not there anymore. They tried to, I think Micros at the time tried to buy it, and they tried to set up a satellite studio there, but it didn't work out. And a lot of the Indian colleagues I had there, which some of them are till today amazing animators, they just spread all over the world.
Gotcha.
Now, like some of them, I mean, one of them, very good friend of mine, Prashant, he, one of my favorite guys, he's here with me now in
oh, very
Blended.
Cool.
He's on Trolls 2.
Okay.
And then there's other guys like Deep, he's on Sony. I think he worked on Spider-Verse, and I believe Angry Birds 2. And some of the best people. Kapil, he's a supervisor in DNEG in London. Teju, Shajo, all these guys are in Montreal and Canada.
Found a home then, huh?
They're all like spread all over. Yeah. I mean, nobody is worried for them to find jobs. That's not the worry, really.
Right.
It was more like everyone has that little, especially them, because I was part of the Indian team only for Penguins, but a lot of these guys were in DreamWorks in the DDU. That's what they called it. For like 5 years or so. So they had their little, you know, it was their little home, and I think they maybe have that nostalgia in their hearts. So I feel that. But yeah, I mean, no, everyone is doing great.
Very cool. That's good to hear.
Yeah.
Okay, so now from DreamWorks India, where did you go after that? After Madagascar 3?
Yeah, so after Penguins.
Or Penguins,
Yeah, Penguins. So Olivier, my Hoka on Penguins, he was being tapped by Oriental DreamWorks in Shanghai, in China, and they were basically at the time just building a studio from the ground up. They had, I mean, it was literally a huge venture of trying to set up a feature animation studio. From zero. There was nothing there, and he was gonna go there as, you know, like as a driving force for animation to set up the whole department, to set up the first project, which was supposed to be. I mean, they were discussing many projects at the time, and it ended up being Abominable, which at that time was Everest. It was called Everest, and basically he offered me to go with him. And we already had established this working relationship. We knew each other, and it was working out really well. And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll take the chance. You know, again, another whole new level of learning in terms of the responsibilities I was gonna get, because I was gonna contribute. I mean, that's how it all started. It was more about just contributing in a higher level than just animating. It was more about you get all these responsibilities like liaisoning with other departments and training people, like training junior animators, and even development in a deeper level, like months and months of like just trying to develop rigs and characters. It was an amazing prospect, but like I said, the studio was starting from scratch, and it was tough because you start to value and realize, okay, these big studios that we know now, the system is already in place, but even if you want to build it from scratch, it's a huge endeavor. I mean, from every side. Like we had we were using Maya, for example, and it was like Maya out of the box. There was no plugins, no nothing, and you're like, okay, this is like animating back when I was a student, with the same toolbox. It teaches you. I mean, it's a slap on the face to teach you about. It's not about the tools necessarily. It's all here, and it's all in the talents. And but it was tough, and that's how. Yeah, the whole journey in China started that way. It was this whole adventure on trying to build up the studio, and then eventually get into making the feature.
So, in addition, I mean, because if you have DreamWorks, they were behind this, what was the biggest challenges of being able to not utilize a lot of what they already had?
Yeah, so that's the dilemma. I mean, there are certain subtleties in the arrangement and the setup of that studio because it was in China, and it was what they call co-production. It was a venture. It was Jeffrey at that time involved, but there was also like CMC, China Media Corporation, I think. So it was a company that's not necessarily solely owned by DreamWorks. They had the name Oriental DreamWorks behind, but the political side of it and the kind of the setup of it is a bit complicated. It's even beyond my understanding till today. But basically, we were not like India, for example, the DreamWorks dedicated unit, the DDU. That was a direct branch of DreamWorks US, or DreamWorks Animation. But Oriental DreamWorks was a kind of a different setup.
I gotcha.
So we couldn't share the pipeline, like we didn't have all the technical advantages and tools and system that DreamWorks US had. We had to build it. We would have the artists and the leadership from here every now and then come and help us out over there. But we didn't have access to officially use, software or things like that. So, for example, I mean, to give you an idea, at that time, the animation team was working on dubbing in Mandarin Kung Fu Panda 3. The whole movie was being reanimated in the lip sync in Mandarin.
Gotcha.
So to do that, obviously the main animation was being done here in Primo, right? The software that DreamWorks uses. They would export the caches, the geometry, so that we could import it in China in Maya, but we could only animate the mouth section. So we built a separate rig to animate, to try to match that.
Oh my goodness!
So the geometry and everything, that the acting is all there from the animators that work on it in the US, and we just had to reanimate the keys on the mouth and the lips.
Okay. But are you trying to match the motion too, or is it being applied?
That's the thing. The motion is like a cache geometry that's already done. We are just we are literally cutting the seams here.
Okay.
Just put in a rig and then it just follows. Right? The animation is already done in the body, but then which is tough. I mean, it's. I'm not a big fan of that, but
how did it turn out?
It turned out well in the sense that it blends really well to to the untrained eye. Of course, it's gonna fly. I think I would talk to some of the animators there because a lot of the team there was Chinese, so they obviously know if the acting and the dialogue is matching with the body language and the accents and stuff. And obviously there were some weirdness here and there that wouldn't match, but overall it worked out. I don't know if it worked out in terms of profits, like in terms of marketing, if it was worthwhile. Yeah, I have no clue about that.
Gotcha.
But in terms of visually, I mean, if you don't know Chinese, for example, and you just watch it, it does look like it's flowing
Gotcha.
well. But I believe there are some things to, like, if you do know the language, and there are certain accents that might not make sense with certain emphasis on words and things like that. So
I gotcha.
It's like anything. I mean, like, language is not just about changing the words. There's a lot that goes with it.
Yeah. I'm currently learning Spanish right now. So
awesome.
Yes.
Awesome.
So I totally understand the difficulties of learning a new language.
That's cool.
Like, oh, it makes sense now why people would say, oh yeah, I can understand it, I just can't speak it. I'm like, how could you understand it but not speak it? I'm like, okay, now I understand that.
That's awesome. If you ever need to practice, you're welcome to.
All right.
Yeah, that's cool.
Gracias.
De nada. That's awesome. And yeah, I mean, funnily enough, talking about languages, Chinese was Mandarin was a challenge as well for us in the studio in Shanghai.
That was gonna be my next question. Yeah, how did you? I'm sure they spoke English, but probably not well. And I mean, how did that work?
Yeah. So obviously, the majority of the bulk of people were Chinese animators. And like you said, like, some of them would speak English, some of them wouldn't, some of them kind of understood, but they didn't speak it. They understood it, but they didn't talk. So there was this whole thing of, okay, there were two components about it. One was like the production staff we had were acting as translators and interpreters. So we would, say the stuff in English, and then they would help us translate it live there to explain it to the animator. The problem I started to notice a lot of times was that animation terminology already in English is very confusing. Already, like overlapping action and secondary action. Okay, what's the difference? You have to explain that, or sometimes you're talking about spacing and timing, and people might get confused. It's such a complex terminology. So I would notice, they would be talking in Chinese. Squash and stretch. I'm like, oh, they're not translating that. Oh no. And then little subtleties like I mean, there were so many things like that. So at one point, at least the very basic stuff I wanted to learn and at least talk it through. I think if my Chinese ex-colleagues and friends are hearing this, they're gonna laugh, because I don't think I was very successful in my Chinese. But I tried my best. I would try to force myself to speak a little bit, at least, to get across what I wanted. And
how long were you there for?
I was there for 2.5 years.
Oh wow! Okay,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
very cool.
But a bit less than 2.5, maybe 2 years and 3 months, maybe.
Okay, that's a decent amount of time to spend in a place like that. So at least you kind of feel like you got your feet wet enough.
Kind of. I mean, I love Shanghai. I love the culture and everything. I enjoyed my time there.
Very cool.
Work-wise was tough, I have to say, because of all these challenges we were facing, and it was unfortunate because we never really got up to speed to start making the feature that we wanted to make. We were like ramping up, and we were doing a lot of like commercial work for Kung Fu Panda 3, and the translation in Mandarin for the movie, and then all this CP work. We even got to work on a theme park ride, which is now, it's funny, it's the one that you see in Universal Studios now, the theme park ride of Kung Fu Panda. It's the one we originally worked on in China, but what happened was with the format we worked on was at 48 frames per second, 4K. And what happened when Universal Studios acquired DreamWorks? They decided that they wanted it at 60 FPS. They wanted new sequences. They wanted a whole bunch of stuff. So after I left China, I think what I heard was they took the whole project, they redid it here in LA with the right format and the settings and everything. And then that's what you see now.
Gotcha.
So it's kind of, I worked on it, but I didn't, kind of thing. It's weird. So all that stuff was happening, and when they announced that Universal Studios was acquiring DreamWorks, that's when there was like this shift on the nature of Oriental DreamWorks, that it transformed the studio into a more of a development hub.
Okay.
And now what they do now, it's called Pearl Studios, and they're working with Glenn Keane and his movie Over the Moon,
Right, yes.
and all that stuff. So from my understanding, what they just like developing the projects, but then they work with other studios to get them made, and they will tap into platforms like Netflix to distribute it and things like that.
Gotcha.
So it changed completely. And at that time, what happened, my wife as well, poor thing, she had a really hard time in China because she wasn't able to get a work permit or anything, so she was at home. And then the cultural barrier was there with the language and for everyday life. So we decided, okay, maybe let's take a break from this. And I came back to Spain, and I was doing some freelancing, and that's when I worked with you guys for a little bit on the.
That was fun.
Was it
the Clark?
Clark,
Pest Control. Yes,
Pest
our
Control.
superhero.
Yeah.
Your cartoony timing for that one shot in particular, and I'll have to post it here, was just phenomenal. It was just so much fun. Also, we get it back, we're like, this is great.
It was fun. It was really fun to work on it. Really small little piece, and I was like, yeah, let's have fun with it. The rigs were great, and it was awesome.
Very cool.
And so then I was like for a year I was just freelancing for a little while after.
And that was in Spain?
In Spain, yeah.
Okay.
So working remotely for different people. And then there was this opportunity that came from London. So I went back to the UK, but this time in London. Like everybody, when I talk about UK, everybody thinks London right away. Okay. But I actually had never been in London, like never lived there or anything, or worked there. And so this opportunity came to work as a character developer in the new Pokemon movie, the Detective Pikachu.
Oh, okay.
So,
very cool.
So what happened was they were looking for people to help out in character development, and they originally were debating whether I would go on Lion King or that movie. And I was like, I would love to do like development. I really like that stuff. I just didn't know what movie it was for.
Oh, you didn't at the time?
At the time, I didn't know.
Okay.
It was all undisclosed and confidential stuff. And I was like, oh, cool. But they asked me to come to the studio to work. It wasn't like a freelance thing or anything. It was like on site. I was like, okay, I'll go to London. And for a couple of months, I was there. And it was great in the sense that it was a very nice thing where there was this little team of animators that were considered a sort of brain trust with the director and the previous team.
Uh-huh.
And we would have we would have the script of the movie, and we had freedom to choose like bits and pieces of that script and just realize it in 3D in animation.
Okay.
So I would like read some stuff and there's like a cool action sequence. I'm like, oh, let's try something out. And then you're working with previous as well. So I think it was what was the studio? Was it Method maybe? Method Studio? I can't remember. There was a previous studio that basically we worked with, and we would go to their building and we would be animating, and then the storyboard and the previous team would see what we were doing, and it was like back and forth.
Wow.
It was really cool. And then I got to work. Yeah, sorry.
When you say develop, are you helping to get the look and feel of the type of character, how they walk and all?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
The part that's so cool about this, as I'm hearing it, is because you said at the beginning of this podcast was, things like Dragon Ball Z, things like Pokemon were very instrumental for you getting into animation. So it's just really neat to hear you.
And I tap back into Pokemon, right? Yeah.
Yes.
It was awesome. It's great. No, and I have to say about development, it's something I love. I love development. Like I think it's my little specialty that I would love to harness more and more in animation.
Very cool.
It makes me feel in a way like closer to what you would do if you were an actor, right? You are preparing for a role, you're rehearsing, you're trying to get into this character, and it just makes me feel that way, like, oh, it's closer to that rather than you just given a shot and you just animate it. Like, actually you have to really embrace a lot of the internal stuff and go deep dive, you know. And I love that. I really love that. So yeah, this thing was very unique. Also, it was like my first experience in VFX because it was a VFX movie. And I wanted to try that out. I was like, VFX, how would that be? I mean, I animated something so cartoony and snappy, and am I gonna survive in this VFX thing? And it was very, very, very interesting to see like what people get excited by. Sometimes it's slightly different.
How so?
In the sense that you find that you have to achieve entertainment through physicality, which is something that, I mean, you have to do it in feature animation too, but sometimes in VFX is really like they hammer on that. So you know, like you really have to sell the weight and the overlaps. But what I did miss from feature, which maybe I'm wrong. I mean, my experience in VFX is very limited, so I'm by no means like putting anyone down. I respect a lot of people I met there. They're amazing animators. The one thing that I did miss, like as a nostalgic thing, as a feature animator, was, you know, the whole acting part. Why are you doing what you're doing? And you know, questioning those things. And and just the whole arrangement of the infrastructure of how VFX houses operate and all that. Like, for example, not even having the opportunity to talk to a director of the movie and things like that. It was just very different. So it was interesting to see all that and experience it. It was very limited, like I said. It was only for 3 months I was there. And then, funnily enough, as I was wrapping up on that, DreamWorks reached out to me. And they were saying that they were still working on Abominable, and you know, they were interested in having me there, and they were willing to go through all the visa paperwork and everything. And it's like, oh, the US, Hollywood, yeah,
all right,
my dream. And it's been 10 years of industry working here and there across the world, and finally I ended up here.
That's amazing. And I did see via LinkedIn that you are now a supervising animator there.
I am.
That's amazing. That is amazing. How did that come about? I mean, because
I don't know.
I mean, other than the obvious of you, your skill set. I mean, like,
to be honest, I don't know. It's a mix of parameters, and I think there's so many talented people at DreamWorks, some of the best. And I guess it's a matter of, it's the thing that happened to me in India as well. It's a matter of like the need at that time, no? Like what's happening is like we have multiple shows and we have too many good people to share between shows. Like who is gonna go on what? And maybe that's my guess that, okay, we need someone who is, you know, able to do this style in this particular moment, in this particular project. Who can we have at this time? Well, maybe Ravi's finishing on Abominable, maybe, you know, he would be interested in coming this show. And because I did voice out that I wanted to be involved in an early pre-production stage because that's what I love. Maybe that tied with the whole thing about being promoted, and I'm just lucky. I don't know. I mean, my Hoka right now is Dan Wagner, the Hoka of all the Kung Fu Panda movies.
Yeah. I've heard great things about him.
Yeah, he's a master. I mean, he's an animation director, but he also animates himself, and he's like super fast. I don't know how, and it's just great. I mean, he's very easygoing. He makes you feel very comfortable, and he again, that element of trust. You know, like yeah, if it's cool, go for it. So it's a fun experience working on this movie now.
Now, how has your roles changed now being a supervising animator there?
Well, in many ways. I mean, first of all, I have to, you know, it's kind of what I was exposed to when I was, you know, in India and China. It's kind of similar responsibilities, but so you are, yeah, basically you're liaisoning with other departments. You are helping out the Hoka on, giving notes to people and keeping the quality check. You're developing characters as well. In DreamWorks in particular, I don't know in other studios, but in DreamWorks, we have this peculiarity where supervisors have to do quota also. So we have to animate.
Yeah.
I've heard in other studios, the supervisors kind of have a more of a management role, and maybe they are there as a pinpoint consultation kind of point, but not necessarily they animate, or maybe they animate 1 or 2 shots here and there, but the quota might be flexible. But for DreamWorks, they require us to basically animate too. So we have to juggle with those 2 tasks.
And it's kind of funny. I'm having a tough time remembering who I interviewed on a podcast, but they were talking about that very thing and how it was. Oh, you know who it was? Hang on a second. Simon Otto.
Oh, yeah.
And okay, so I'm pretty sure that's what it was. This is the end of last year. But he was talking about how he jumped in on some shots, and he goes, it was a good reminder. He has said sometimes you can be kind of what you're describing right there, where you can kind of almost forget what it's like to be an animator, so to speak, because you're now managing everything else, and you jump back in a shot, you're like, okay, now I can kind of remember again some of the, and so it felt for him the ability to still empathize with the other guys and the gals who are animating and go, okay, yeah, I understand where you're coming from. That's actually pretty good then that you're in that same boat.
Yeah, and it's a huge challenge. I mean, exactly what Simon says is so true, and I'm a big fan of that. Like, don't talk the talk, walk the talk.
Right.
So I try to like follow that, because it's easy to just be comfortable knowing thinking that you know what you're doing, but then when it actually is about doing it, it's your brain operates in a different way, and maybe if you haven't done it in a long time, you might be a bit rusty, and it just keeps you on your toes. And it ties on many things. This whole thing about keep doing it and keep pushing yourself. It ties in many ways. Like, I have a good example where I always tell this story. I finished my gig in India, and I animated this octopus character, all this stuff, and I'm like, I can animate like the most complex thing you can imagine. It's so cool. When I went to China, we used to have these training sessions with the Chinese team, and Christophe Sarand, one of the greatest masters in animation today, he used to conduct those sessions with us. So he used to help us train the team, and he would do a lot of lecturing, and we would do like exercises like, from bouncing ball to walk cycles and stuff like that. And the walk cycle assignment came, and at that time I was like doing some development for Abominable, right? And my Hoka was like, oh, you should do the assignment. I say, okay, sure. I'll just try to have some time. I need to just carve out some time, and I'm a bit worried it might affect my schedule. No, just do it. It's fine. Just take your time. Okay. Walk cycle. Okay. I should be able to do this. And man, my walk cycle was so bad. It was so bad. So horrible. And Christoph was like pointing every single thing. And he just, again, it is a reality check. Like, you cannot. I'm making this sound like really stressful, but it's not. It's actually a good thing, right? Like, just keeps you on check.
That's right. Keeps you humble, keeps you mindful that, hey, I got to keep striving. Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
I can't ever settle on my past accomplishments.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, correct. So I don't want to discourage people or anything, especially like people who want to get into the industry. When they hear this stuff, like, oh, it's so difficult. It's difficult, but it's fun, Like, you learn. And again, it's a huge reality check. I was like, oh, you really have to do your homework. And so that was a fun little story about that walk cycle thing.
Now I got to tell you, when I first saw Abominable, I was like, oh, okay, looks fun, and then I was working, doing some stuff, and my kids saw it and like, oh, show us the trailer. And I watched it again. I'm like, Oh no, this is actually looking really cool. This is going to be a fun show. So yeah, I'm actually really excited for it. I think it's going to look really good.
Yeah. I mean, it's a fun one. I have to praise Jill, the director, and Todd Willerman. Very great people to work for.
Gotcha.
Very nice. Very nice people. They always made you comfortable, and yeah, the experience working on that project was fun.
Yeah.
I actually love it's a one movie that where I exercise a lot subtle acting, and like not having dialogue in shots, just having like reaction faces and things like that is very subtle. It's a good exercise on that, like for me. That was something that I really enjoyed doing in that
very
movie.
Nice.
And again, great animators, great people. Ludo, Guillermo, I mean, I can't think of Hans, all these great supervisors we had. Learned a lot from them. Marco, I mean, there's so many people, so many good people here in DreamWorks.
How has your workflow changed, or has it throughout the years? Because you're just naming all these, these people. He was great and instrumental to me. And this, has it changed much in regards to your workflow approach?
So this is funny. I was just recently, like a couple of weeks back, asked to do a talk at DreamWorks about workflow, and I think I'm the worst person when it comes to workflow, because I am the kind of guy who I try to tailor my workflow to the need of what I'm doing. So if it's a specific, I work totally differently if it's how to train your dragon, subtle acting shot, or how to train your dragon in a crazy action sequence with a dragon.
Okay.
I will work totally different way than Boss Baby, subtle acting, or Boss Baby. It's really tailored to, like, the technicality of it is very tailored to what I want to do and what the character needs and the show and all those parameters. So what I like to talk about is mindset and what I look for. What there's a certain foundation I have in the habits I have. The habits, basically. It's not workflow per se, but it's more about habits I have. And based on those habits, then I tailor my workflow. So like one of the things I really hammer on is what animation means to me. And I always talk about, like, this little, I mean, I'm going to make it sound really academic. It's not the purpose at all. But it's basically this whole thing about timing, spacing, and posing. Those are the three things for me that you play with when you animate. And the reason why I think that way is because it's tangible. You actually see it in the graph editor. When you have the graph editor, the vertical axis would represent, your spacing, your range. The timing, it's on the horizontal line, and your keys in the curve are your poses. So it's literally a tangible thing that you can see.
Gotcha.
And those three things are what define visually what you're seeing. And then if you take an example of Luxo Jr. from Pixar, right? And those three, the triangular thing I'm talking about is what you can use to achieve, let's say, to bring life to that lamp and make it hop. But then to actually make the short film with him and the little big one, and like the relation of father and son and all that, that has a layer of subtext and acting and personality. And that's the stuff that you find out when you talk to a director in a launch, when you try to understand the project, when you're doing video reference, you're acting, all those things. So there's this clear, I try to assimilate it that way. Like it's the internal embracing part of understanding your character versus the execution part of it. And to make sure that you're working in tandem, but you understand the differences. And when you're taking notes, whether this is a note on the execution or a note on the understanding of the character and the subtext and all that. So things like that interest me a lot. When it comes to workflow, I do have certain habits. Like, for example, I was very influenced by Jason Ryan, right? But I've never been a 2D animator or anything like that, by no means. But I do draw. I do force myself to draw.
Okay.
So a lot of times I would do thumbnails on paper. Then I would do video reference based on what I'm brainstorming. Or I would do video reference and then do thumbnails based on the video reference. It's very organic, it's very flexible. And then if I can afford the time, I would do like a 2D pass in with the timeline. I would just draw like Jason Ryan does, like in Flipbook. Similar thing. I would try to do that, but my character is it starts as one drawing and then it scales across in the timeline. It morphs into something else. It makes no sense. So it's very personal. It just helps me. It's not meant to be shown to in a daily or anything. Sometimes some supervisors and all have the eye and they understand, and like that triangle I was talking about. For example, this phase is not about the animation triangle. It's all about the other questions. I'm discovering the subtext and the gesture I want to hit is this one, and the energy and the choreography and all that. But it's not about the specific execution of it.
Okay.
And that comes later in my blocking path and all that. So that's what I tend to do. I spend a lot of time. I really want to make sure I spend a good amount of time on this. Sometimes I would spend literally a week.
On the upfront.
On the upfront, yeah. Sometimes the nature of the job doesn't allow you to. The nature of the shot sometimes is the easier shot, so maybe you don't need that much time. But generally, I try to really invest time on this, and then it just makes your life easier down the line. One other habit I tend to try to think about is. And this is I think Glenn Keane talks about this. I think that we don't remember movement when we see something. We remember the visual images that make that movement, right? Like the key moments visually that come to our brain is what we remember, and that correlates to when you do the key poses on your animation kind of thing. So. Again, it's the way I think. It's not necessarily how people think. Everyone thinks, but so that's how I try to infuse that a little bit, and then I'll be like, okay, so I will do my blocking. I don't work in step necessarily, but I do. I mean, it's kind of like step, but it's basically duplicating the keys, one next to the other, and then I shift the timing around and stuff. But it's kind of like steps, but so sometimes I do that. Based on my drawing pass or my video reference.
Okay.
Sometimes I would just do straight ahead from my drawing. So I would just match whatever I did in my drawing pass. I would do a straight ahead, which is most of the times what I did on Penguins. Because my supervisor, Nico, he told me something that was super interesting. He said and he comes from that background he was from Gobelin, from the French school. Mm-hmm. So he comes from that very artistic background of drawing and 2D and all that. And he was like, if you learn to draw your character, you will understand better how it will move.
Interesting.
And I said, wow. So I really tried my best to hammer that in the octopus, because it's so complex. I need to learn to break it down so that I can explain to people later how to animate it as well.
Gotcha.
And that's what it ended up being. I used to do video reference at the beginning, but then it got to a point where and the style of the show was embracing that. The universe of Madagascar is very cartoony. So
yeah.
It's allowing you to, it's going in that path of, simplify to amplify, basically.
I like that.
yeah. I mean, it's a core thing for me. And so I was trying to hammer that, and I tried to break down this character in shapes. And then the functionality of those shapes, how it moves, I've basically carried that mindset as much as I can. Again, but it changes. I mean, in a movie like Dragons, for example, it was a very different workflow. I would do a lot of times, because Dragons is the highlight of making an animation shiny dragon. And this was another epiphany kind of thing for me in Dragon, when I would see people's work on dailies and stuff. It was all about the choices you make. So sometimes you might not polish your work so much, but the choice you made is so like in tune with the subtext that's needed with that moment, and the acting and all that. It's so good that it just works.
It sold it
on the money. Yeah, you sold it. Yeah. So that was a huge revelation. Like, wow, I really need to hammer my research first before I actually dive and animate.
Gotcha.
And so that's kind of what the things that I tend to pay attention to.
Nice.
And then, yeah, like when it's complex characters like that, I mean, Dragons, again, was a good exercise on trying to make it easier for yourself, when you animate and go bit by bit. And then spacing, of course, like spacing to make that sense of realistic weight and everything very believable. It's very important. There's so many things we can talk about. It's endless. I mean,
those are
I
great
love
stuff.
this stuff. Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot to talk about, and I find myself like the other thing I really am fascinated about is like people coming from different studios and having different philosophies.
Right.
So like when I came here in US, I finally got to meet people who have worked at places like Disney or Pixar or things like that. Otherwise, I would have never met anybody from those backgrounds. And just the way people think and the things they look for is sometimes really, so different. Or I have friends who say, for me it's all about appeal. It's not appealing, I can't stand it. And okay. So there's so many parameters. But yeah, for me, like in terms of when you ask about workflow, I talk more about habits and things I look for rather than workflow, because there's so many like technicalities and people making custom scripts and hotkeys, and I'm like a layman. I'm very basic. I'm like, if I'm in a cave, how would I animate? Okay. I try to be like that. It's funny. I remember talking about this. Jamal did a caricature of me like being a caveman trying to animate, because I think he was very much into like these little sophisticated like X key setups and all this fancy stuff, and he would show me, it's like, you should use it, and I was like very hesitant, and I would try for a week and I would give up, and then he drew this thing. It was so funny.
Grabbing your keyboard and
literally.
Keyboard bad.
Exactly.
Well, Ravi, I really, really appreciate your time, man. This has been really great for me, being able to catch up with you. But just some of the information that you've expressed in here, I know this will be great for anybody listening. I like that one, simplify to amplify. That's fantastic. That's really
that's
good.
Actually from it's another one. It's not from me. It's from there's this pantomime coach that came when I was in Spain.
Oh, cool.
His name is Robert Bennett. He's awesome. He's a great pantomime acting teacher, and he's very well known in I think mostly in France. He goes to a lot of Gobelins in Gobelins, and he goes to a lot of European studios, and he has been a consultant for animation studios as well in the US, I think, because he's American. But yeah, he talked about this because a lot of people discard they say, you don't need to know about acting and pantomime and all that stuff. Just do the reference and just wing it. And to me, it's like. You could. I mean, it doesn't hurt to learn about it. It doesn't hurt to look at it and listen to what they have to say and just implement what you feel is right. It doesn't hurt at all. And this thing for me was like, it's essentially like what caricature means, right? Like you're taking the core elements of what you feel makes that essence of the character, and then you exaggerate it, you play with it, So yeah,
that's
simplify
great,
to amplify.
That's great. Well, really appreciate your time and wish you the best of luck. And I'm sure we'll catch you around here soon.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been great. All right. It was awesome. Yeah, and good to see you. And regards to Daryl as well.
Will do, man. I'll let him know.
Awesome.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.